had an issue with his back and had to cancel only a couple of days ago. So the other participants are, after Chris, Ondřej BOJAR from the Charles University in Prague, Maksim from Unbabel, Director of Applied Artificial Intelligence at Unbabel, and Marta Aragao, who is the Portuguese representative on the European Union of Associations of Translation Companies. And so we will hear from them what they think about this, topic. We will then obviously also ask you to come forward with your questions. And I was also asked to once again remind you that there is Slido that is available, where, as far as I know, there is even a little question that was put out to you where we would like to survey your answers. So I encourage you very much to go and have a look at Slido and answer that survey, and also, of course, type in your questions. So now I'm very happy to introduce our first speaker. We will have 3 speakers who will have a presentation, and then Marta will be the main discussant, after which the floor will be open to your participation. So our first speaker will be Christian Federmann.
Yes. Right. Thank you very much. Hello, hello. Let's see how that goes. Forward. Yes, translation at a click. It states my name, but of course these are Chris's slides. He sends his best. He can't be here, sadly, and regrets. He will try again next year. We both share the same first name. We're German. We are both working on MT, so I hope to be a somewhat decent substitute for him. Any of the good slides are his. Any of my errors are obviously mine, so you can grill me for those. It's translation at a click, instant gaffe or instant help. Obviously, we are in the instant help camp, because for us, this is what we try to implement for within our various groups in Microsoft, and then for all our customers and friends. So we somehow simplified the whole thing to being this whole job is simple. We just want to remove the language barrier. In our case, that's not merely removing it, that's just removing it, so just do it. Of course, this is a tall order, and our means of doing this tall order is machine translation. We want to, it's instant help, and why is it instant help? Because there's 3 dimensions of quality, 3 dimensions of translation. Does this work? A point? No, it doesn't. Quality, speed, and price. And you can obviously only get 2 of those, not all 3. And for us, the main thing here is that MT can be very, very fast, and it's at least several orders of magnitude more efficient than human translation. So here, Chris compared human translation for 1 million words for $250,000 to $280 for the machine translation bit, and this is already customized, more specialized MT. If you just go down to what our normal engine offering costs, it's even cheaper. If you were happy enough to be Microsoft Office or an internal user, you would basically pay near to nothing, so then it becomes really nice to generate millions of words of translation. And so for everybody internally, for our customers, that is instant help, because while it certainly is not always perfect, we get to way more than those 2 content word errors per however many words we had before, but it's still something which allows people to generate understanding in a different language very quickly. All right, this is a nice adaptation we created last year after, or around the time we had this infamous ludicrous human parity paper. This is adapted from a slide from Chris Manning from 2016. You all know that, or you basically have heard about it. MT is a long-standing problem. It started with the IBM Georgetown experiments trying to prove that MT could be helpful and could actually work. All this noisy channel stuff about, oh, English is, or Russian is basically just encoded English, and we will figure out how that statistical mapping works. There was the LPAC report, which basically crashed work on MT a little bit. There were different other phases. Every 5 to 10 years, quality sort of went up significantly, and then people liked it a little more because it became a little more helpful. It was a lot, it was never instantaneous in these times, right? Even in phrase-based MT or hierarchical MT in the 2000s, we were far away from being close to instant, but it was becoming better and better. In 2016, we had this initial advances in neural machine translation, abusing the neural name to make it more appealing to humans who also operate on neural brains. So suddenly it appeared to be much more powerful, much more human. Then we spent 2 more years to build something which, for a very, 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 very constrained set for Chinese English, allowed us to prove that at least on that data set for those specific segments, without any document context, blah, 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 we were able to prove that we were not statistically significantly different from human translation, which we labeled human parity. Side note, never label anything human parity. You get bashed for that. Which is why we did it 3 times. So initially, we did it for speech recognition, where the problem is a little easier. You have some distorted signal, which is human speech. You have a reference transcription or multiple of those reference transcriptions. And then you can literally measure, you pick, I don't know, 10 random humans and ask them to listen to that and transcribe. You might even take trained transcribers to get them a better chance. You will have some level of error for those humans. And then you can ask a machine to do the same. At some point, we found that our 2017 human parity level was nearly 95% on a 0 to 100 scale. Then, of course, subsequently, being part of speech and language as a team, our leadership had this glorious idea of, okay, now we did speech, now we should do translation, which then ended up on our plate. We had this 69 versus 68.5 machine translation precision result. That was for Chinese English. It has a lot of constraints, as I just mentioned. And then at the end of last year, we also had this text-to-speech synthesis benchmark, where in the end of the whole thing, the TTS models turned out to be nearly indistinguishable from what humans did. So that was our little excursion in human parity. As of 2019, we just call it really, really good quality. Because that avoids all these issues of you getting flagged for calling something human parity. So where are we on that spectrum, right? We're getting closer to parity, right? For very narrow domains, we can claim we have parity, and then it's more like a technical parity. It doesn't really mean that you can expect a machine to always outperform you or be in the same level of quality. You will mostly recognize this if you basically do the Philippe approach and look at MT every couple of months, because then you see that it somehow has improved. Right? You will not see this if you go to any of those MT websites tomorrow, but if in half a year or in a year you come back, you will realize, oh, this is getting more and more fluent. This is getting more and more really close to perfect. You have these 1-2 errors, but it's really, really good. This only holds, though, for the most important languages, and by important I mean what we deem as important, mainly by usage or by market size, which is, of course, a completely ludicrous notion of importance, because language is identity, so every single language we have is important. It's just that for a lot of those languages we don't have the data, so for us it's a lot harder to build the respective models. What is missing to actual true parity is we never really looked at document context, text or document level structures. We have no real world knowledge in those models, and we have a quite significant chance of messing up so badly that you would never want to present the result to customers or users. The nice thing is that nowadays we actually go there. We are building customized MT systems which get us closer to building quality for your specific scenario. Typically, these models on small amounts of customization data, which are your terminology, your specific company domain content, get you very good improvements measured in bleu up to 10 points or even higher, so that's really nice. Our research topics focus more on getting the complete document context in there so that we do not mess up MT when we see it, but every time figure out it's about machine translation or other acronyms. We also want to implement the cross-sentence transfer better and maybe try to get even other sensory context into our models to improve them. Neural networks are great and we like them a lot because they somehow emulate what your human brains do. They're really good at encoding some intermediate information in the so-called hidden layers, and that allows you to then later on generate output which typically tends to be super fluent. In a sense, in a loose sense, it's translating more based on concepts than word by word, which was more the statistical approach. And of course, you still have oodles of chances to mess up stuff, but it will look very fluent. In fact, one of the nice things about Neural initially was that humans looked at the output and it just looked so naturally fluent that everybody was really happy seeing those output until they realized, oh, we messed up the complete semantics of the sentence, in which case the translation was actually worse than what we had before. All right, real knowledge needs to go in, otherwise it is completely useless for humans. So that is currently one of the topics where we try to connect knowledge sources, be it, I don't know, ontologies, taxonomies, whatever you have inside your company, inside your specific organization. Try to get that connected to your MT models so that the MT has a better chance of getting names, places, connections between all these entities right. Two examples from Catastrophic Mistakes before I hand over to Ondřej. So we had this very nice example where this unfortunate plane downing was reported in a Dutch newspaper, and our system quite publicly attributed blame to Australia and the Netherlands, which led to some very nice emails where some folks suggested we might have been hacked because this could never have been what we intended. It was just bad and empty. You know that happens. A second one, for those of you who don't read Arabic, here we basically managed to translate crown prince into king, which you may imagine is not so great if the king is actually still alive and well. So these are the things which are happening. They're happening much more often than we would like them. The nice thing is these days MT is used more and more, so that means we get more and more of those gems in our email every day, so we can improve more and more. And yes, but we still believe that speech recognition, translation, speech synthesis are getting closer to human quality, are getting closer to enabling us to build human-to-human connection and human-to-human understanding. So for us, this is clearly instant help. Thank you.
So good afternoon. Let me continue directly. I'll just see which is forward and which it is scrolling automatically. No. This is not my slides.
No, that's Chris's appendix.
Okay, so we need to jump through that as well. So while I'm clicking and hoping that I'll get over that quickly, let me introduce myself again. I'm Ondřej BOJAR from Charles University in Prague, and there was even from Charles University in Prague, the Institute of Formal and Applied Linguistics. And actually what is missing there is the Faculty of Maths and Physics, which doesn't even mention computer science. So I have to warn you, I'm a computer scientist by education, and therefore if I'm too technical, please put that question to Slido or wherever, and if enough of you ask, then hopefully we'll try to explain better. So today I'm representing here the European project called Bergamot, which is also can be dubbed browser-based multilingual translation, so translation within the web browser. And the project is coordinated by the University of Edinburgh, and we are one of the research partners. The other two research partners are University of Sheffield and University of Tartu. And our user partner is Mozilla, a company which you may know from your web browser. The mission of the project is to enable users to use their web browser to interact with the world in languages they do not speak or do not speak well enough without sacrificing privacy and trust. And we'll get both to privacy and trust on the following slides. So first, the privacy. The users always want their confidential data to remain confidential. And a good motivation are examples where the was not quite ensured. So the example we have here comes from Norway, where the state-owned company suddenly found their employment information and contents foundable by a search engine, and that was because this content was translated with the help of one of many computer-assisted translation sites, and somehow it got in the caches and it was publicly available. So that obviously was noticed by the media and the company, and this is something that you really do not want to happen with your data. So the solution that our project proposes, and we have started at the beginning of this year and we have 2 more years to go, is to translate exclusively at the user's end. And obviously that is a challenge. So for that, you know that everybody uses these neural networks, and these are big things that are trained on in huge computer clusters, and they even to run them needs often some dedicated hardware, which is graphical processing units, GPUs, and so on. And instead of this huge equipment, we want everything at the runtime, not for the training time, at least for the most part, to fit on the end user small desktop machine. So the models, which are often, well, my colleagues start with a size of 250 gigabytes per language pair. Our models are actually 1 gigabyte per language pair. But anyway, this is way too big to be distributed to many users at once, or to flood everybody's hard drives with such big models. So in order to reduce the download time and the loading of that model into RAM and so on, the models have to be squashed without sacrificing, without reducing the translation quality, obviously. So we can go to 1/10 of the size with the current technical improvements being researched at the University of Edinburgh. Then obviously when you are browsing the internet, there are all the possible languages. So if you want to do translation on your end without any of the online translation companies noticing that you are reading this content and that you are translating that, you want to have these multilingual or these many language pairs on your desktop again. And there can be further saving achieved if we put more languages into one model. So that's the multilingual models. But the question is, how many language pairs can you fit into one model without sacrificing the quality again? And then the translation speed. We are not going to have the high-performance GPUs. We'll have the low-end CPUs in everybody's desktop. So again, heavy optimizations are needed. No more floating point numbers, just integers for the speed up and so on. And now the trust. And this is actually the harder part. Can we trust the translation? So again, some motivation. I guess you have seen this. This is a Guardian article reporting or reproducing something which happened in Israel. So the Israeli police was very active at monitoring social networks, and they were also monitoring social networks in Arabic. And what happened is that a man shown in the picture and blurred posted a picture of himself, and the post in Arabic was translated as hard them in English or attack them in Hebrew. And the police officers obviously arrested that man and then interrogated him for several hours. The reason is that at no point before his arrest, anybody who spoke Arabic would actually read the post. The post was "Good morning" in Arabic. So this was an error in translation that led to very bad consequences for a single person, but you don't want any of that. So if there was some indicator of like unreliability, obviously there is this general indicator, this is machine translated, but this is a short sentence, it doesn't seem any suspicious in any way. So if there was some indicator like a red light or maybe flashing red light, then they would give it to a colleague and they would validate what the machine said, and they would not have arrested the man at all. So the 3 things that we focus on in improving the trust in translation quality is trust in translation, in machine translation in general, is first, translation quality as such. We want to improve that. And again, there is many ways of improving translation quality, but we will focus primarily on domain adaptation. And that's because, as I will mention tomorrow in another panel, various domains have been well covered by machine translation systems. So translating news is actually quite reliable these days. But the content in the internet is much more wide in topics, and you need to know which topics you can translate well and which not, and you need to adapt to that, and you can adapt even at runtime. You can also use some metadata which is hidden in the web page and so on. So there's a lot of research to be done. And if you translate, you should also indicate how well you translate it. So that's the quality estimation focus. And here, again, we can get some feedback from the user as they are seeing that, and still staying private within the web browser of the end user. We can kind of refine the quality estimation models, and I guess that Max Carlos will mention quality estimation in his presentation as well. And one topic that we particularly focus on is called outbound translation. And the thing is here, how do you produce a text in a language that you do not speak? So we had a presentation on the city of Rome, helping foreigners in Rome, for example, to ask for a new ID card or whatever is needed. So this is exactly the situation. You are a foreigner in a country, and you need to ask a question. So in that case, you would like to somehow refine or double check that machine translation worked well in your case. So this is the very primitive user interface that we are starting with, but the idea is that we will somehow squash it and put it into a nice compact form. Here the user can speak German, and he has to ask a Czech question. And he will see the reverse translation to validate whether the Czech conveys the same meaning or not. So I have an example in going the other way around. Here the annotators or the test users spoke Czech and not German, and they asked a German question. But they couldn't write the German. So they used machine translation from Czech to German, and they were refining the Czech source until they were happy with the German. But they could not speak German to assess the quality. So they only used the reverse translation. So here the example says, I'll read just the English glosses. Like when the user first wrote their their Czech question, the meaning was, who does Beyoncé present as her most important curse in music? Musikflucht. And that's obviously not the thing that the user wanted to ask. So the user noticed, thanks to this additional help, and refined the source, so changed the source into the kdo měl na Beyoncé největší vliv v oblasti hudby, or in English, who had the biggest influence on Beyoncé in the music domain. So because of the slight differences in the wording, the MT system suddenly translated the sentence differently, and it was actually a correct translation. So the machine translation system that we use here between Czech and German was intentionally mid-quality. It was not the highest possible quality system, but this is the setting that you have for most language pairs, except for the very high resource ones. So this is where we are aiming at with this support for outbound translation. And in the very preliminary results, we indeed see the improvement in quality of the German thanks to the refinement. Okay, so that's two main goals, and there is also the ease of use. So to achieve the ease of use, we are partnering with Mozilla. They have experience with users. We have our user experience work package. We need trivial installation, configuration, and we need to indicate the quality of the translation in a reasonable way so that the user is not overloaded. And we need to somehow minimize or reduce the space of the outbound translation and also other things in that. And then the last and main goal, I would say, is openness. We are working on open source software. We would like to produce open access models, and we have open access publications. So with that, thank you, and I'll give it forward.
Okay, hello everyone. So my name is Maksim and I'm a director for Applied AI at Unbubble, which the company that some of you might heard about. So the first question is basically, what is Applied AI, right? So at Unbubble we have like several AI departments, and we have like fundamental AI, for example, which is responsible for long-term research, more academic style, right? And actually what we do, we bring AI to products. So we're responsible for the practical aspects of AI exploitation in business. So yeah, Unbubble, first of all, the vision of the company is to create the world translation layer. Sounds like as a kind of a nice slogan, but what does it mean in practice, right? So, and those of you who studied computer science or might heard about open system integrity model, so OSI, might guess that actually we are creating layer 8 of it, right? So this model, for those of you who are not familiar with this concept, is basically describes how systems communicate in the world, right? I mean, that how IT systems talk to each other. So starting from the physical layers, so how the electric signal goes from one point to another, and ending with the application layer. How the users actually talk to the applications and try to basically make what you are planning to make. And what we are trying to do is kind of create the 8th layer, so make actually this communication completely transparent through the language barrier. So it's a pretty big vision. So right now actually we are focusing on something which looks like that. So we want to translate 25% of customer communication. So long story short, actually what we're trying to do is basically to get into the customer service market, right, and help actually customer service companies in the world to be more efficient and to help them actually serve their clients in multiple languages. So, this is actually our formula, right? So we identified 5 areas where we want to focus on and which actually are priorities for us. Let me go through them quickly one by one. So the first one is the AI stack, so the technology itself, right? I mean, Unbubble actually is the company which is investing into AI very seriously. So I mentioned that we have more than one AI department. Also, we develop our own software. We are pretty active also in the research area. So, and this is kind of an element which you cannot ignore, right? If those of you who follow Forbes, for example, publications yesterday, there was a very nice article about how to create the AI company, and it was mentioned like in the first or second paragraph that you need to really seriously invest into AI and not just use third-party AI APIs, right? If you want to create like a product. So second one is gig economy. So it's a pretty, let's say, hypey concept these days, but for us it's a kind of essential part of our offering, because what we do, we try to make machines and humans work together, right? So that's actually why we use like a lot of translators, unprofessional and some professional translators as well, and we involve them in the post-editing processes as some other LSPs do as well. So the next one is the data, right? So every time when we start working with a new customers, the first question we ask, okay, so but what is the data? Right? Do we have your data? Do you have your terminologies? Do you have your translation memories we can use? And you might guess, in many cases, the answer is no, we don't have anything, right? And in this case, we actually have to go and go to the client and basically talk to them and create this data ourselves. So because actually without it, we will just be like one more generic company which delivers like the same service for all the customers. So the next element is continuous learnings, and this is a pretty big one, so I'll be happy to take questions after the presentation. So it involves like multiple activities, starting from retraining the systems, and I'll have a couple of slides about that, and up to how do you do analysis of machine translation or human errors and make sure that your customers don't see them again. And the seamless integrations, of course, I mean, we are not working in isolation, so we need to integrate actually with multiple systems, primarily customer support systems like Zendesk and Microsoft Dynamics, and we want to do it like as seamlessly as possible. So, we actually have been like pretty successful in that. So we have customers from Microsoft to Tinder, so various industries, gaming industry, travel, etc. And that's something that you probably heard, and because it was on the news like a couple of weeks ago. So we, in the round C, we raised 60 million, which is, let's say, an exceptional investment round for translation industry. And we also are pretty active in the European projects. So right now, actually, we have 3 ongoing projects. One is called ApeQuest. Some of you might heard about it because it's an extension to the e-translate system for European Commission and European organizations. Another one is Interact. It's for crisis translation. And the last one, which was just approved like last month, a couple of weeks ago, it's called User-Friendly variant. So here we want to improve the core machine translation, open source machine translation system, which is used by multiple companies. So let me actually briefly walk you through the user translation pipeline. Right? So we have more than one content type we are dealing with. The classical one is an email one, so basically it's communication between customer service agents and our customers' via email, right? So in this case, we actually don't have like a very short SLA, so this translation can be delivered within minutes, not seconds. So we actually once we get the order, what we do is the first thing is data anonymization, and here there are multiple reasons for doing that, from GDPR to how you treat entities, for example, who have a number or certain currency. Then you probably don't want to rely on machine translation to translate it, because actually what you want to do is to be translated in the same way as you get it, right? Or maybe you can implement some business logic, for example, translating from dollars to euros or something like that. So afterwards we send it to the machine translation system, and afterwards, as Ondřej mentioned, actually, what we do, we send the output of MT to the quality estimation model, right? So, and this model is critical for us. It's a kind of a differentiator, I think, of Unbubble offering from many others, because in this case what we do, we send a significant amount of our jobs directly to the customer without any post-addition, because this model allows us to basically predict how good or how bad our translation is. Of course, we need to optimize the threshold, I mean, for this decision, but in the end of the day, it makes it much more efficient. So, but those jobs which were not translated properly by machine translation are sent to the translator community. Also, we have like a special machine learning mechanism which allows us to optimize this process. For example, when we have a job in the queue which had been there like for a significant amount of time, and we know that actually there are no many like translators available at this moment, then we actually give it to the first available translator. However, if we still have time until the end of our SLA, then in this case, what we do, we can choose between translators and select the most appropriate one for this job. And the back loop, we also have continuous training. So here, once again, there are a lot of elements which can be discussed, starting from how we fix the errors, how we generate insights for further development of our machine translation quality estimation systems, and of course, retrainings. So the chat offering is slightly different. So in this case, actually, we don't have a very long SLA. So you probably know that when you chat with a machine, you don't want to have like a high latency. So you expect actually the machine to answer you, a chatbot to answer you like in seconds or even milliseconds, right? Same happens when you communicate with the customer service agent, right? You are not ready to basically wait in front of your screen for a long time. So that's why actually we don't have a luxury of showing the output of machine translation to the post editors. Right, so we basically, what we do, we send the machine translation output to the customers. But it's not the end of the story, because otherwise we would be just another Microsoft or Google Translate style machine translation. So what we do actually, we select those segments which we think might contribute to the model, and translate them with humans or with our like standard translation pipeline. Why we do that? Because by doing that, we generate actually high quality training data, which is further used to improve our system over time. Cool. So there's one actually thing which I wanted to talk a little bit more in detail. It's a system retraining, right? So many companies talk about it. It's kind of a popular topic right now in social media. So how do you guarantee the gradual improvement of your machine translation systems or machine learning systems overall over time. And generally, it's basically the general belief is that actually if you take some data, like periodically, for example, 10% of of the data that you generated, that you used to generate actually your initial model, and once you produce actually this data in your production pipeline, then you take 10%, you feed it to the system, you generate it, and you basically, via these retrainings, you make sure that actually your system improves over time. It's probably right, but mapping this concept to the machine translation industry, actually, here I prefer to talk about like content drift. So, for example, if you work for a client, a software development company, and let's imagine that they released a new product or a new version of the product, then probably questions which customers are asking to the customer service agents changed as well, right? Because of new terminology, it's a new product, so maybe there are new problems that they want to address. So, and the trainings help you to basically keep up with this demand, and basically change the translations your model generates. But another element is more specific to our use case because we don't have much control on the data that we get at the source, right? You cannot actually tell your customers, okay, use this particular language, or otherwise we won't be able to serve you. So, and that's actually system retrainings also helping because they increase the generalization power of your system. And that's an illustration how we measure it. So we typically use 3 data points. One of them is every time when you do retraining, you sample data from the freshest chunk, right? So basically, let's say if now it's November, in December we do the retraining, we use only December data to retrain the system and also to test the quality of the system. And here we expect improvements in each cycle. But we also have use 2 more metrics. So one of them is we use a fixed test set from the first month, let's say, of the year, and then we don't expect it to grow over time because of content drift, but we also don't expect it to drop significantly because then it means that something is wrong with your data. In addition to that, we also use a translation robustness metric, and this is, let's say, specific maybe for the customer service case, or maybe for all the cases where there's not much control on the source data. And here, what we expect is to grow, but to grow very slowly. And this growth can be explained by the increased generalization power of your system, as I mentioned earlier, right? So, and these test sets typically consist either of noisy data or the data from multiple domains which you don't change over the iterations. Yeah, and maybe the last thing which I wanted to mention is the keystroke data. So once, when our post editors interact with our system, we can collect results of this interaction. So if, for example, they read the translation, we can register the latency time. When they change the words, we can also register it. When they delete the words, replace it, and etc. It's a pretty complex data structure. And to be honest, like so far, we don't know exactly how to use it, right? So, but there is quite a lot of value in it, and we already kind of at the beginning of this journey, we're starting to generate some insights. So I think I don't have like much time to explain these graphs, but what you can see here is different colors represent different post editors. So in certain dimensions, applying a special mathematical techniques to signal processing, you can basically identify which post editor generated a particular translation, right? So how exactly it can be used? There are multiple directions. So it can be error identification, can be for editor representation. And what we believe might be the most interesting one, let's say more scientifically heavy, is non-sequential automatic post editing. So right now, automatic post editing techniques, they try to emulate the work of post editors from left to right. So basically, you read it. Read the first word. Yeah. Sorry. It is the first word. It's my last slide, by the way. And then you go to the next one. So it's basically sequential automatic post editing. What we can do with these techniques is do it not sequentially, right? So basically, to be more human and be more efficient at the same time. That's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, I don't have slides, so you are lucky. Philippe, Christian, Ondřej, and Maksim, thank you. I feel safe now that I have your emails, because really, after all I saw, this is pretty complex. I represent UATC. For those who don't know UATC, we are an association of associations of translation, the European Union of Associations of Translation Companies. So we represent the public, the private sector. So basically, association of LSPs, translation companies. I'm here today to comment on how amazing translation has changed. It's incredibly how, like, just 20 years ago, we used dictionaries, paper ones. I still remember that at university. And now we use them just to level the screens. We don't use them anymore. So it's really, really amazing. Also, I've just arrived from Havana. I'm sorry to tell you this, but I spent an amazing week there. And I had no internet. So I only had internet because I stayed at a 5-star hotel. Local people don't have internet. And also, for us, to have internet, like, we had to scrap these Wi-Fi things, and there was only one spot in a specific place in the middle of a street. And this is controlled by the government. So, like, for me, being here today, after having arrived from Havana, where technology is still so remote, and listening to all that you presented, and of course being in the industry, is really, really amazing, and how fast everything is growing. And after just taking a few notes of what you've mentioned, instant, fast, speed, privacy, trust, user end, community, customer service, like all of you used these keywords. Now, I will start with some questions. I'm not going to talk too much, but one thing, purpose of translation. One of the things that you all mentioned too is about breaking barriers, okay? So all the times, translation is to bring people, businesses, cultures, getting all of us closer to each other, communicate, and nowadays to do more business, right? So another thing is that for ages, and when translation started to be a profitable business for us, and I'm talking about the private sector because I have to, customers complained that it was expensive, and human translation is expensive. Now we have all this technology, but remember, how was it 20 years ago? Dictionaries. How was it 15 years ago when cat tools started to be used? Everybody complained. Nobody wanted to use. I don't know. I remember when I started using it at my company, and translators didn't want to because they said, no, we are going to get lower prices, worse paid. Nowadays, can you imagine working or translating without a cat tool? It's impossible. Also, technology helps reduce costs for our customers. So, how do I sell it to my customers? I tell them, look, I can cut costs if I use cat tools, if I use, if I use machine translation, and you can translate more. So sometimes it's not about getting less, it's about putting our customers doing more, investing more into their businesses instead of cutting the costs. There are many ways of doing it. Also, we know that there's still a long way in terms of educating the private sector and our customers, because most of them don't know it yet, apart from the big ones. If we go into the small part of the industry, they don't know it. And most of the LSPs, MLVs, and even the freelance translators, they don't reflect this into their projects. So after these main questions that we should think about, we have machine translation or neural machine translation or whatever it comes, I don't know, I don't want to talk about it. We have two main different things. So we have machine translation as a service, these guys talked about it, and we have machine translation as a productivity tool, okay? So machine translation as a service is what enables us, I'm sorry, I have to use this example, to use Tinder. Thank you for the example. To go for Havana and book a restaurant. To go to Vietnam and find a guest house. Whatever. Also, all the examples you gave. But it enables the world, it enables the world to move around easier. Machine translation as a productivity tool enables us to leverage more. Of course, I think this is, I'm speaking on behalf of UATC. Sometimes I have to say things that are, I'm speaking also for myself now. I believe that translation should not be so expensive, because otherwise it's impossible. So this is Marta speaking only, so in between brackets. So I think all this technology will enable the world to do better, to communicate better, to translate more, okay? And with better quality. And quality is whatever the customer needs. So quality is a very relative thing. So now, challenge. What is machine translation? How do we use it? How do we do the connection between the customer, the LSP, who sells it, the translator? This is the really, really big challenge. How do we deal with expectations? How do we charge? How do we pay? These need to be crystal clear. Do we have the answers? Not yet. Are we working on them? We are trying to. If you talk to each other, and we as LSPs and as CEOs of LSPs and MLVs, we talked about this every day, and we don't have the answers yet. But we are working on models, and we are sharing with each other. So I believe we'll be there very, very soon, and I think it will be even shorter than it was with CAT tools. So also I have an information that UATC also does an annual survey, not only UATC with its partners, but according to the European Language Industry Survey, only a minority of the translation professionals, both companies and freelancers, are using MT on a regular basis. But more than 50% of them are at least using it occasionally. And the percentage increases year after year. I'm sorry, I'm trying to read the notes. So basically this means it's very small, it's getting there, little by little. We have some messages. Translators, we can only encourage you to embrace it. As soon as you do it, you'll take more advantage of it. Universities, please start training your students. Training students for post-editing and machine translation is not the same as teaching them how to use CAT tools. Working with machine translation and post-editing requires other skills. So, thank you. I think this is all about communication. So, talk to each other. I think we'll find a way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Marta. Now the floor is open to all of you, and I would like to take a few questions, so not one by one, but I will ask a few people to pose their questions before the panel will respond. So we have a question over here.
Yes. Is it fair to say that post-editor is a translator of the remaining part of the 21st century? And if so, what are the lacunes for us linguists? Transcreation, maybe adaptation of the text, literatistic translation, what else? Thank you.
There is one over there.
This is a question for Marta Arago. You used the phrase, translation shouldn't be expensive. I approached a lawyer 2 weeks ago for help in interpretation of a will. And he is going to charge me £270 per hour. I was approached a few days ago by a company asking me to do the translation of a legal document, good quality. And they were prepared to pay maximum £20. How would I compare the use of legal translation? Thank you.
Maksim, a question for you. So Unbubble has received this enormous investment for developing machine translation. Now you can trailblaze. You can create new technology. But once you create and pave the way for others, how long do you think it will take others to catch up with you?
Okay, I suggest we start responding here. So we had a question addressed to Marta, one to Maksim directly. So Marta, you want to start?
You asked the worst question in the world. One of the things is that there are no rules, and it's really, really very difficult. It's impossible. There are no prices set. It shouldn't be amazingly inexpensive. Of course, there are languages. Imagine in Portugal, there is only one translator from Portuguese into Icelandic. Of course, she charges whatever she wants. Is it fair? It's not fair, but still, she's the only one doing it. And I think I would like to see a system that would be fairer than it is now, because it's not fair to see it like that. I'm sorry, I don't have an answer for you. But I think with the technology and with everything that is happening, I think companies will start thinking differently, because it will level in a way. Because now I think if you think about it, a few years ago, the end user didn't have access to translation. They didn't even know what it was. If they need the translation, they would have to go to a company, and they didn't even know how translation was done. Nowadays, because of these guys, everybody knows how it is done. So the process starts to be more transparent. So I think in a couple of years' time, things will start changing. That's the best I can do. I don't know if any of you can add something to this.
So if I may, I would simply say that you have to educate your customers that they should demand high-quality translation. Machine translation, even with all the development that we are doing, does not provide any guarantees. If you want any guarantees, yes, the price can be 10 times, 100 times higher. That's
Okay. Maksim, do you want to answer the other question?
Yeah, sure. So what they teach you at the business school is that competitive advantages, right, of like winning companies. And one of them, which is usually mentioned, is the first mover advantage. But they also teach you that actually in the modern world it's worth almost nothing, because there's so many competition, and the barrier, actual technology barrier, is so low that someone with bigger resources can actually catch up with you pretty quickly. But then look at Microsoft, for example. Right? I mean, there are like a lot of software development companies in the world, but unless Christian leaves Microsoft, I think it's virtually impossible for them to catch up with them. Right? So in the near future, I mean. So I think that actually it's not about like the speed of catching up, it's about resources, it's about like the consolidation of the company internally and also externally, availability of investment funds, and primarily talent. Right? If you have like a great team, then it would be very difficult to beat you unless someone like brute forces the market or the technology. So yeah, hopefully I managed to answer your question.
Would somebody like to answer the question on post-editing? That was the first question.
Yes. So I would think that this is not about translators turning into post editors, right? Because at some point that's hopefully something which machines can also support. It's more about considering. Let me finish. It's about considering that there's a whole market for translation and for high quality translation, which is based on humans doing this, because this is something which our machines will never do. Right, so I want to believe that there is an amount of text in the billions of words which we want to have translated, which is not so interesting to human translators. And for some of these scenarios, there is not enough human translators. One of the elements which has become more and more relevant to us and for translator is that our service is used for people who simply need the enablement of understanding in a different language, right? It's the same for speech recognition. If you can suddenly transcribe very high fidelity what is uttered and somebody who can't hear can read, this enables, right? And this is not against translators. This is about just augmenting translation by machines which can do that in a snap for billions of words. So I see the future as a joint collaborative future, and I'm happy to discuss that more.
Okay, we also have apparently many questions coming on Slido here. You can see them in front of you, I don't know.
Yeah,
you see them also here behind us. Okay, but I see that many of these questions are coming back to the usual topics around quality. You know, is it possible to get rid of the human totally?
So the first one is different. I'm happy to have an answer to that, at least.
Okay.
Thanks. That's actually only thanks to my PhD student who has just submitted his thesis and is waiting for the defense date. And after all that research of 4 years of training models and actually focusing on lowering the training time, which essentially translates to carbon footprint, he was examining how to transfer the knowledge that is already captured in one trained and heavy model for another language pair. So we have an interesting result that essentially if you are training a neural machine translation system, you should take any existing model, just download it from the web and continue training. So we have a very strong English to Czech machine translation system, and this helps in translation from English into Russian and also from Arabic into Russian, even unrelated language pairs. So the neural networks learn all what's in the model. The neural networks learn all what is like natural in languages, like how long sentences are and what are various frequencies of patterns and so on. And this is transferable to some extent totally across languages. So continuing the training is very useful. And this student of mine was so sensitive to this sustainability issue that he actually added a last short section estimating how much carbon footprint he made through those experiments. And it was nice, if I remember correctly, it was just about the same carbon footprint as 4 international flights would be. So for a 4-year PhD thesis, traveling to 4 big conferences overseas was exactly the same amount of footprint on the training. So that's nice that I see a balance. Like you spend half of the resources of the earth on doing the research and half of presenting them. It is not out of relation of the proportion. Yeah.
Let me make something clear regarding the prices, because I've read some of the comments. When I mentioned cheaper prices, I didn't mean, I have a translation agency company, okay? I don't want to sell cheap. That's not what I said. Let's go back, because I started talking today about, I took you back on a journey when we used dictionaries. And I remember talking to people that were translators, and doing a translation was extremely expensive. People used typing machines. People didn't have access to translation. Only a few had. It was tremendously expensive. When computer era started, when the CAT tools started to be used, prices went down. More people started having access to translation. And of course, with the use of the CAT tools and more technology, we are able to leverage better for our customer. So when I say that I want to be able to deliver more, I want to be able to leverage more, I don't mean I'm not a cheap translation company. I lose a lot of the quotes I send out because I'm certified. I do quality checks and revision, so I don't sell cheap. But I don't believe that we can still live in a model that we sell it for the, I don't know how much, 300 or 400 against the 20 or 30, I don't remember exactly. But I think that we should use the technology not only on our behalf. I think if we can use it on our behalf, we should also take it to our customer. That's only what I meant. So I'm sorry if I mentioned something or someone thought I was saying that we should go very cheap on prices. It was not what I meant.
Thank you. On the topic of prices, maybe if you permit, I'd like to offer something also to your consideration. There are plenty of companies and private people out there, consumers, that do not have access to translation today. Why? Because for them it is simply too expensive. So that's another aspect maybe to keep in mind. Technologies are not just here to service large organizations, particularly international organizations like the EU, or large multinationals. There are also millions of other types of customers out there that have needs and maybe legitimate needs. So now I'd like to ask for another round of questions, maybe up there.
Thank you. I have a question for Marta and Maksim. I was just wondering, with post-editing, I don't know how you determine rates. I'm guessing that it's basically supply and demand, that it's fairly standard revision rates. But unlike traditional revision, by post-editing, a translator is essentially improving your algorithm. So I'm just wondering, can you imagine a scenario where those translators who are post-editing are basically getting some sort of dividend continuously based on the cumulative improvement to your algorithm? Because you are deriving an advantage from all the little contributions they make. Sorry, just to finish, because otherwise, essentially, you're concentrating knowledge and therefore income in the hands of the few, which is not a very sustainable model. Perhaps one can compare this, even though with streaming it doesn't work that well, buying a song versus streaming a song where there is some sort of payment supposed to be used for every streamed song. Every time you deploy it, somebody's edited translation, you are deriving value from their work. Thank you.
Okay, quick answer to that one.
Marta, do you want to start? Okay. Well, first of all, yeah, I think that actually our post editors, first of all, they're in a pretty good position right now, in a pretty fair position, to be honest, because the last time when I checked, actually, the good ones are making like around, like at least $8 an hour. Working on our platform, and for majority of them, it's not their first job, right? So they actually, it's like second or maybe third job for many of them. But to get to your question, I think it's a very interesting perspective, to be honest, right? Because if you look at the process dynamically, it's totally true, because actually post editors are doing two jobs at the same time. First one is that they are delivering high quality translation to the clients when it's needed, and second, they also generate the high quality training data over time to making the system, the core machine translation system better, right? So to be honest, like I've never thought about it from this perspective, but it's a very interesting one. So I'll be happy to take to have like a discussion with you about that. Like, what would be the fair model in this sense?
Okay, we have another question over there.
Can you still comment on this one before?
Okay, quick comment.
Yeah, well, I would just like to say that I'm totally opposed to that idea, because I think that all the royalties thing makes bad for the long-term development. And to me, it's like if a teacher should get, a teacher of yours at your grammar school should get a dividend from every word that you have uttered, because they have like suggested how to formulate ideas and so on. I think that people should be paid for work they are doing now and not for ideas they had decades ago. So.
Okay, question over there.
Yes, this is probably for Chris and Maksim. So I have an LSP which works at the premium end of the market, and that's at the premium end of the creative market. We do film, subtitling, books, that kind of thing. Part of the reason we work in that end of the market is because I felt when deciding where to take the company that it would be vaguely future-proof. I know it's pulling numbers out of the air, but any kind of a guess, looking at the progress you've made today, any kind of a guess when machines, neural networks, etc., will be able to vie with us for creative translation work?
The smaller the scenario and context, the sooner it will happen, right? So, but that doesn't. So, at some point, you can reasonably expect neural networks trained on gazillions of movie scripts, etc., to spit out something which resembles a really high quality output your translators generate, right? But it will resemble only that. It will not go to the step where it will instantiate something creatively which has not been there, right? So it will be a long time when we can really have these models which sort of give us something which feels like the next big spark, but it will be a shorter time until you get output which appears to be human level, right? We had this in the SMT days, where at some point for some languages you looked at MT output and it looked pretty much like human translation. And only when you knew exactly what to look at, you figured out, okay, this is actually MT. And in your scenario, I think you chose well. Going into the premium market means you have something which is more future-proof, and then it depends on how urgently somebody wants to really crash into your market, right? If that is not the case, I mean, for us it's more about, we still have this notion of being very general purpose translation, and having a specific niche or a specific domain makes it easier for you to maintain it.
Okay, we have to conclude in 2 minutes, so you have to speed up.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Further comment on this is, I think it's very hard to evaluate creativity. So it's very easy for machines to come up with something that the watchers, that the audience will like. And this is actually apparently happening in text generation. So there is this page, Talk to Transformer, and it generates articles, just a continuation, a language model generation. It's total rubbish content-wise, but people like that better than real articles.
Okay, we have time, I guess, for one more question. So I saw here one.
Thank you. This has been an absolutely fascinating day. We began speaking about the premium market, and right now we are immersed in the depths of the bulk market. And I would just like to ask everyone to recognize that there are those different segments, right? And that nowadays professional translators use technology tools as a matter of course. It's not man versus machine. But seriously, what you are describing is entertaining and interesting and surely has its uses, but it has nothing to do with the premium market.
Yes, totally. And I was very happy to hear the morning presentation on the premium market, because there I saw that translators and interpreters are not lost at all. Like, you have great future to expect. And the things that we are discussing at this panel now, that's the self-help for the users, that never was any market of yours at all. It is just extra territory that we are getting as human society.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like you to thank again our panel. And thank you to the organizers as well for this very interesting day. And now somebody will conclude, I suppose, yes?
Yes, that's right.
Thank you. I actually probably don't need this, thank you, because I've got one. I have my, excuse my back, everybody, just for a second. So we've come to the end of the day. You've almost come to the end of the day. You've all made it. It's amazing to see that you're all still here at this time. Thank you for staying. It's been fascinating, and it seems that there is a rosy future for translators, and there is a lot of potential out there and new possibilities, despite the disruption of machine translation. I'd like to also thank the interpreters for staying on beyond their time. And for also trying to make sense of speakers who were cramming in words very quickly so they could finish their presentations on time. It's always a bit of a risk when we're in a rush at the end, but thank you very much indeed. For those of you who are present here in the hall, you're now invited to a networking drink outside, just outside this room. Tomorrow